people join up here. Whoa.
Then you set up crazy.
Yeah, dude. Where are you at then, Alex? You're in Buckeye or?
Yeah, still in Buckeye, man.
Nice. Awesome. Let's give it another minute or so for some more people to join. How's everyone's week been so far?
Good morning, guys.
Good
Morning.
morning, good morning.
Everybody sounds all hungover this morning.
So funny.
Like 1 o'clock.
Uh,
Hey guys, sorry to interject. I have been trying to get on this for a long time and I signed up for a lot of webinars, and can someone refresh me what this one's about?
Yeah, this is for the group Blueprint. So have you been making calls on our lists or anything, Daniel, or
Not yet.
gotcha. And do you know when you joined by chance?
Heh, not that either.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
yeah, no worries. We can chat after this then. I'm wondering you might be a bit newer then to the group.
yeah, no, actually, I spoke to you, Daniel, about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but we'll catch up sometime this
Okay.
weekend and get you settled.
Awesome, thanks guys. I'll just listen in the background.
Cool. If you have any questions, just raise your hand, okay?
Thank you.
So are we supposed to have been making calls? Because I'm not even that far yet.
Yeah, so right when you join, we're gonna have, did you go through, let me see here, the helpful documents and start watching the Loom videos in terms of the tutorials of how we're pitching the creative financing to agents and requesting a list and things like that? Or have you not gotten there yet? You've just joined the group.
I'm not even sure I've joined this group, but it's I'm actually Gator, but I do remember I was on one evening when you guys were doing practice calls for agents.
Okay.
But that is all I have done. And as far as Gator, I'm in the vault right now. So I'm just trying to learn the other side of this. So perhaps I'm not in the correct area, or perhaps I am. I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
Also,
Yeah.
are you guys out of Colorado? Because I thought I was in a Colorado group. I thought Carly put me in one there.
We're in California. You're probably thinking of maybe a Gator. I'm not in Gator, I'm in Sub 2, but I know Sub 2, they have their own specific sections and groups. Like there's a SoCal Sub 2 group that I'm a part of. So maybe they have the same for Gator then, that they put you in a Colorado group with people from Gator. That would be my guess.
Quick question.
Very well
Quick question. So not everyone here is a sub 2 student, right?
No, I would say probably the vast majority of people aren't Sub 2 students, right, Alex?
Yeah,
I'd say probably
I would agree
99.
with you.
Is there anyone in here that's a Sub 2 student beside Alex and I?
I
I'm just
am.
curious. Okay, nice.
Yeah, I am.
Awesome. Great. Handful of people then. Cool. Shoot, I lost my train of thought in there. I guess we'll just do kind of a check-in on some people. I know, Ken, you've been doing really well this last week with the calls and having some good traction. Any kind of updates you want to share with that, or?
Yeah, so me and Alex are actually going to be getting on the three-way phone call after this meeting to get one on contract.
Nice. Is that's the Santan Valley one?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually
Cool.
it was my first phone call I made last Saturday. I got three deals from one realtor.
Nice. Nice.
Sweet.
And then I don't think Noah or Cherie are on the call, but we have non-refundable earnest money submitted from buyers on those. So those two deals are for sure going through. And then I don't think Ronald's in place. We're trying to find someone for that Florida deal, which we may have locked up today. Hopefully we'll see what happens with that. Alex and I, we were just going to touch on a handful of things here today in terms of hybrid deals and seller financing and some other creative financing methods, because I know there are some people where they're making these calls and not 100% of the scenarios are going to be very low equity sub twos. There are occasions where we're pitching a hybrid where it's the sub two and then the seller finance carry portion. So we were kind of going to go over the specifics of that when you pivot and when you want to start pitching that. But first, before we dive into that, just wondering if anyone had any other questions or if anyone wanted to share how their week's been going with the calls. I know Chris, you had some traction the last couple of days with a few leads, right? I know that one we sent a contract out on last night.
Yeah, did he end up responding back to it?
He did, and I was going to follow up with him right after this meeting and see if he presented it to the seller,
Gotcha.
because it was kind of late last night.
Yeah.
Guys, I had a pretty funny story actually with one of the agents that I spoke to this week.
Let's hear it.
So I look up this listing and in the description, it says words like fully assumable loan, low equity, owner owes, and gives the number, right? So this is what it's saying in the description on Redfin and Zillow.
Okay.
So I call this woman and she doesn't call me back. And I was like, well, I'm staying on this one because like the description is just a home run. So I call her back maybe a couple hours later and I start talking to her and I talk, she said something like, right. I mean, she goes right off the bat. She's like, this is not a situation where we're going to be interested in any sort of subject to, or, where a buyer wants to come in and take over the loan. And I was like, oh, okay. Would you mind explaining to me why? And she says, well, I get about 30 calls a day about this, and I don't feel like I need to at this point. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, did you ever think that maybe you get 30 calls a day about this because your description says fully assumable loan and gives the exact amount that the seller owes on the thing? And she goes, no, I didn't think that. I'm like, I was like, well, that's why I called you. Like what the hell's wrong with you?
Was she trying to get people to kind of open the door open so she has more opportunity, or she just didn't know what it was?
I don't really even know what it was. And then we chatted, like she sort of like backpedaled a little bit and got like a little less snippy after that. But it was pretty, I mean, at the end of the day, we didn't, it just wasn't going to happen. And I was like, well, listen, like, just so you know, that's the reason why you're getting all these calls, because that's what your description says.
Yeah, that's funny. And honestly, so it said there in the description, fully assumable. So she was probably looking for someone to assume the loan, right? And not getting specific sub two, because one of the deals we have locked up right now, it was Cherise. That one, same thing in the description. It didn't have the remaining balance, but fully assumable VA loan, interest rate and everything. And the agent was telling me she's getting blown up a handful of messages every day for that one specifically. Where, I mean, you're always going to get people, even if it doesn't say it in the description, if it's a low equity sub two, people like us who are pulling these lists and targeting them, they're still going to get traction. But when you have 2.5% interest, fully assumable loan, whatever it may be, verbiage like that in there, then that lead or that agent, I should say, is going to get blown up, probably, like you're saying, dozens of calls a day, depending on the market. That's funny. Yeah,
it was pretty funny. I actually just had a good conversation with a realtor this morning out in Charlotte on that new list. And the guy was actually really cool. Like it was a weird situation where I had called looking for the listing agent, and like some sort of like dispatcher picked up from like within the agency. And she was just lovely to speak to. She was, I mean, I ended up talking to her about breweries in Charlotte for like 10 minutes. And then she's like, all right, I'm going to go check those out. And in the meantime, I'm going to get you this realtor. So this guy texted me yesterday, knowing full well that like we were investors. And he's like, I want to help you out. So what they do, and I don't know if you guys have ever heard this before, where like basically this company essentially gives you a realtor to work with, even like within the same company. So then he presents the offer to the realtor within their same company. It's very interesting. So in other words, like this guy, David, and the listing agent Kate work in the same under the same company, but instead of that woman connecting me with Kate, the listing agent, she connected me with this guy David, who is then going to present the information to Kate to then present to the seller. It was a weird situation, but anyway, the
Yeah.
guy was super nice. We're working on a house that, like, I think it probably has maybe $4,000 worth of equity in it. It was something silly, like they bought it for 426 in May of 22, and they have it listed for 430. And he was like, "This is a home run situation for that." So he's like, "I'm going to get you these numbers." So hopefully he gets me these numbers, and I'll get that information over to you ASAP. He
Gotcha.
said he was going to work on it when I got off the phone with him about an hour ago.
Cool, man. And just a brief, I guess, idea of what I have in mind. And Alex, let me know what you think. I think this is exactly it, though. It sounds like that's some sort of firm where they're trying to milk as much money as possible out of a potential client, because it sounds like they connected you with the buyer's agent who's going to write up that offer for a percentage of commission. Is that what that sounds like
Right.
to you, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Yeah, which I'm not sure how we can avoid that in a situation like that, just because if that person, the buyer agent's writing up an offer for us, of course we can discuss that, but then that makes it harder for us to get a good entry because,
Right.
you know, that's probably another 2% commission right there. But I haven't actually dealt with a situation like that before, where I speak with a firm and then they connect me to a buyer's agent. Have you had that happen before, Alex?
No, I think it's pretty unique and interesting for sure.
Yeah, well, I guess the good part about it is this guy seems like really into helping us in that area. So you know, I have his contact, and we left, you know, he's going to get me the numbers for this one, but he, you know, I left it as like, let's touch base after we get through this. Let's touch base and see if you have anything else, you know, in that area that may be of interest. So he seems like a really good dude.
Cool.
So hopefully that'll lead to some stuff too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Rich.
No problem.
Did anyone else want to kind of share any updates from the week, or if anyone had any questions before we kind of dive into some of the hybrid stuff and seller finance stuff? Nope. Going once, going twice.
Just one thing I'd like to add, going forward for this next week is, we haven't really had many appointments set up for us to hop on three-way calls. And I think for you guys, it's honestly the most valuable information to have us hop on a three-way call with you and just kind of hear how we pitch terms to agents and how we kind of build rapport. So just going forward, if you ever get stumped with an objection, don't feel like you need to know the answer. Breathe and just say, hey, look, I think it would be best if we hop on a three-way call with my partner. He's much better at explaining it than me, and take it from there. It could really help you revive some of the deals that might get lost through miscommunication and objections.
Yeah, that's very true. And actually, I don't know if Chris wants to chime in on that, but on that one we sent a contract on yesterday, Chris and I hopped on a three-way phone call, and then Chris, basically after the call, he's like, "Oh, that was really insightful," and like hearing how I dealt with it and presented it, you know, was pretty helpful from what he said in terms of building the credibility and separating ourselves from other people that are making offers, and also showing the significance of that. Because if you're just saying, "Oh yeah, let's take over the mortgage payments," and that's kind of it, like what I was doing with this other agent, he was saying, "Oh yeah, we have another offer. They haven't sent in numbers yet, or an actual contract. It's just been an LOI." Yeah, a lot of people do that. I don't think that person's serious. Well, my seller, they need to get another loan after, so they had questions about that. Oh, I have a lender we work with. I can totally connect you guys and help him get set up for his new loan. We do these all the time. I was just out of state walking a property we're buying, blah, 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 you know, stuff like that. Now this agent is like, this person seems super legit. I want to work with this guy, not the other people we're working, not the other people that have inquired about the property. I don't know, Chris, was there anything you wanted to chime in on that?
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing with Alex, with another agent. He hopped on and cleared some other information up, and it makes you sound way more credible on the deal. He had some questions about due on sale, and then he kind of got the information. I was telling the seller about it, and then we're gonna work from there on that one.
Nice.
Hey, Jack.
Yeah,
One
what's up?
thing, and this is one thing that I mean, and listen, I'm totally open to jumping on a call with you guys, but one thing I found super helpful is either having that the document, I think it's in the helpful documents, that talks about all the common objections.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I have one, actually, he's a sub two guy that I connected with out here in New Jersey, and he sent me like a sub two FAQ kind of thing. And I usually like have that up on my screen as I'm talking to people. So it's the second they come at me with something, I can sort of diffuse the situation with like just some general information. And then if they keep going, then I say, okay, well, I'm open to, having you talk to my partners if I haven't been able to help yet. But having that up is like right there in front of your face. There's not too much that they're going to say because quite honestly, those realtors aren't super knowledgeable about it anyway. So they're only going to know like two or three objections. And those are usually on those sheets. And then you can just kind of hopefully have them pivot a little bit just by having some good knowledge. I found that pretty helpful, particularly this week.
Yeah, that's very smart.
I think I had a pretty good week in terms of having conversations with people. So that's been helpful.
Definitely. Well said, man. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's very true. Having that pulled up is going to help a lot when you guys are making calls. And then a lot of these agents aren't super knowledgeable and savvy with this stuff, so they probably won't come back with another objection or question based on your answer off that sheet. And then if they do, then that's when you could just kind of tag Alex or I in to have, a further conversation about that, whether it's a three-way call or just connecting us with that agent.
Yeah, I think that was well said, Rich. I think when I'm making calls and I didn't really know the answer off the top of my head, I always had that sheet pulled up as well. And for those that are making calls, I highly suggest you follow that too. And ideally, you should be making these calls with a computer in front of you, just so you're able to search up information much quicker than trying to scramble on your phone.
Yeah, and that sheet's going to be, Laura, it's going to be on the Discord in helpful documents. When you click that tab, you will see.
It's what is creative finance email template and the common objections.
Yeah. Then also too, I'd definitely recommend going through the Loom videos as well. Pretty much everything in that helpful documents section. If you're just kind of starting and haven't made any or many calls yet.
Quick question, guys.
Yeah, what's up?
So are you guys just doing direct to agent, or you don't really have, you can get direct to seller? It just depends on what kind of lead it is.
I mean, pretty much right now we're doing direct to agent just because these lists we're pulling are on market, low equity.
Yeah.
We were thinking, this is one thing we're going to touch on, was starting to pull lists specifically targeting some seller finance leads. They'd still be on market though, so it'd still be direct to agent.
Okay.
But for the most part, we're doing direct to agent right now. I've done a lot of direct to seller stuff in the past, and one of the things with the direct to seller, why we're not doing it, is it can get really discouraging and I guess boring unless you're doing like PPC and paying $300, $400 for each lead. That's super high quality. Which that's something I've done in the past, and that's something we're eventually probably going to do. But if we have X amount of people making calls, it's not, hey, here's a $400 lead, here's a $400 lead. Like we can't do that. And that's the thing with direct to seller. If we're skip tracing and pulling lists, a lot of the direct to seller stuff, if you're cold calling, it's just going to be wrong phone number, no answer. How'd you get my phone number? I don't want to sell my house. Leave me alone. And then that would wipe out anyone that was interested in real estate. It'd probably wipe out 90% of them in a week. Whereas at least with agents, even though you're not always going to get a bunch of deals and it's still a numbers game, you're at least having conversations and building a pipeline out, which is why I think it's better to do direct to agent, kind of just starting out and learning, than it is direct to seller.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. It's a lot more feasible, and it costs a lot less to get in the game. Okay, that makes sense. All right.
Because I know people that do a lot of direct to seller, and I see a burnout pretty quickly. And that's how I started. Like 3 months, 2 months, I was just cold calling direct to seller. And that's why a lot of people outsource that to VAs for like a couple dollars an hour, because it is, you're triple dialing, quadruple dialing multiple numbers at once, hoping someone answers, and then hoping that there's motivation for them to sell their house.
Yeah, that's why even like the outbound is very hard because you're trying to convince them. On top of that, like you said, there might be wrong numbers and stuff like that. But like I've been learning a little bit more about outbound or inbound, like marketing where these people are already typing this up, they're looking to sell, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a little bit more research on that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later probably. But
Yeah, definitely. Inbound's cool, man. That's that. If I went back
more
to direct to
expensive.
seller, that's the only
More
thing I'd want to do.
expensive, but yeah, it's more expensive, but like the lead generation is like you spend less time paying VAs, you get more, like a lot more quality, and like these leads are for people that are already looking for some solution to their problem,
Yeah, totally. And then there's no name there, but Samsung SM. I see you with your hand up. That's someone's phone, I'm guessing.
Yes, that's me, Nestor. Listen, it's the first time I got access to a Zoom call. Thank you very much. Listen, when I call these realtors, I introduce myself in a professional manner, and I say that I represent a group of investors that will be willing to be looking at these properties, and I tell them that if they will accept terms or not. They said they were gonna call me back. And it's been a process on it because I'm very new at this, even though that's what I want to do. But above all, I want to give you a thanks for the opportunity. I know it's hard starting, but the deal is I don't have to tell them about any creative finance. You guys handle all that. So that's just, if they're interested, I give you the Jack's or Alex numbers.
Yeah, so basically I would watch I'd go to the helpful documents and make sure you go through all that content there and watch those videos in terms of the scripting and how we're pitching this stuff. Because typically what we're saying is, we're offering to take over the existing mortgage payments, and we want to get those numbers that we need to give a valid offer. So we're going to want the PITI, which is the monthly payment, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. We're going to want to know the remaining balance on the mortgage. We're going to want to know the interest rate. And then once you get a lead and you have those numbers, then you would submit it within the Discord through submit a new lead. You know what we can do maybe after this call, Alex? I'm fine with doing it. We can hop in Discord with some of the newer people that have just kind of joined and haven't done much yet. And we can do a screen share and I can walk them through where to submit things and how to do everything. Would that be helpful?
Yes. Also, identify, because on the list that I got the main interest, right? It's 3.5, but then there's another estimated interest, and it's higher than that. So I need to know the difference on that. Because I need to be able to select the properties that you guys are looking for, which is at least 5% underneath and with low equity, and some of them are higher. And I need to know which one to really target on that list, right?
Oh yeah, that was at 8 a.m.
Yeah, not everything from that list is going to be 100% exactly what we're looking for. I mean, 90% of the stuff will be. Of course, we can't pull a 100% perfect list, and there are some exceptions. Typically, we are looking for less than 5% interest, but I just sent a contract out last night on one with a 5.75% interest rate. So there are some exceptions to it, and that's one thing we're going to cover too when we go over the hybrid deals, because not everything is black and white. There's going to be exceptions to things and whatnot too, in terms of what's a deal, what isn't a deal. And that's just kind of a learning process and learning curve too, because not everything is going to be exact. Like we just have that 5% there just because it's kind of a rough area. Like, I mean, we definitely wouldn't buy anything probably over 7% interest, but I mean, at the same time, if it cash flowed $500 a month as a long-term rental and there was no cash to seller and it was pretty much like a free deal, then of course we would take that deal, So that's just kind of a rough guideline.
Oh yeah. Okay, as a rule of thumb, what should I be focusing on the list? On the 5% interest low and the low equity on the property as well, right?
You could just call on the whole list, honestly. Just literally call every single number on that list and use it as practice. You're not expected to be perfect on your first calls. And just learn from your mistakes.
And I would say the vast majority of things on that. Oh, go ahead.
one of my main deals that I do. There's a guy at work that his parents they do flip houses. They got houses for sale too. I thought that you guys might be interested in it.
Okay, yeah, let's talk a little later about that after this meeting. If you have some time, we can answer some other questions too. But yeah, I would call everything on that list. 90% of leads on that list are going to fit our criteria. And if some kind of slightly don't, then it's still a relationship you're building with that agent and possibly getting information on another listing or
Yes.
potentially some sort of hybrid deal or something might work with
Yes.
that current listing as well.
Yes, the building relationship is really manifested in my life. I'm getting to share emails and call and talking to them. And where I go, hello, my name is such and such. I represent a group of investors might be interested in your property or any other property. And if that property is not available, I ask to see if they have any more. I might be able, or you may be able to be interested. But I do call. I sound more professional than this. But truth of the matter is, I'm learning.
I think he just lagged out. I was about to say the audio is cutting out. I think he just lagged out. All right. Did we want to jump into the seller finance and hybrid stuff now, Alex?
Let's do it.
Did you want to screen share something for that, or should I? I'm just trying to think of. I didn't have anything pulled up. I was just going to talk.
Let me see if I want to screen share first.
Gotcha. Yeah, and one thing Alex and I have been talking about a bit, I don't know when we're going to implement it yet. It's something we've thought of, is doing a little bit of direct to agent seller finance pitches. So kind of the way we would hunt down these exact opportunities is we'd be looking for things 60 plus days on market. So not a ton of traction, a little more motivation there because they have been sitting on market a while. And then owned free and clear, meaning there's no mortgage. And then what was the other thing, Alex? I think we were doing, they owned at least 2 properties. So meaning that they had rental properties, just because that's probably a higher likelihood of that person being open to seller financing that house. One way I've done seller finance deals in the past is you get all the information from the person in terms of kind of what their payments are with the taxes and insurance, or if there's a small mortgage balance, what those payments are too. Then essentially a lot of people who've had rentals for, let's say, a long period of time, a lot of times they haven't really raised rents to current market rate. So one thing that I would always do is, well, hey, what are the payments? What are you renting it for? So it sounds like you're making $400 a month off this rental. But then if you're accounting for vacancy, repairs, maintenance, and things like that, maybe you're making a couple $100. Does that sound about right? Yeah. And then a lot of the times it's older sellers if they have free and clear properties. So then usually I pivot into, well, what if I could give you that exact cash flow you're making $400 a month for the next 20, 30 years, whatever it may be, and you don't have to worry about tenants, maintenance, or anything with the property. And then that's kind of how we often pivot into seller financing and seeing if someone's open to it. So that's something we're going to explore and possibly here in the next week or two, pull some lists on that and see how those go. I know the sub 2 stuff, there's usually a lot more motivation there, but I definitely know we could still get deals done with the seller finance pitching as well.
Yeah, another thing I want to add on to that is with seller finance, it has to make sense for the seller, right? So if they're going to finance 100% of their equity, there has to be a reason that they don't need all that cash up front. And there's several reasons, but for it to work on seller finance, we have to be in low, right? So there's no way we could typically give more than 20% down, because at that point we might as well just go get traditional financing.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And then
Cool.
Was there something you wanted to mention with this, Alex, that you're showing, or?
Yeah. Do you want to
Gotcha.
kind of go over what a hybrid deal is and
Yeah.
kind of go over the 10% or less equity thing? I think that will kind of help us a lot, especially the people that are calling off the list.
Yeah. And then also, like we were just saying too, there's always like you know, there's never exact black and white with it too, because even if something is listed at a certain price and the mortgage balance is this, well, that doesn't mean that's exactly the exact ARV of it. So does that mean that that's really 10% equity? You know, that was another thing. But just to keep it kind of surface level and not as complicated. Yeah, so even with these lists, not everything is going to be a low equity sub 2, even though that's what we're pulling and skimming these lists for. Sometimes, of course, there's things that are just exceptions, whether it was an error with the data or whatever it may be, because of course you can't perfectly 100% pull this stuff. So a lot of the times there's opportunity for hybrid deals, meaning with a hybrid deal, that's going to be a combination of the subject to and then a seller carry or seller finance portion. The reason being that we do that is for all these deals, all these creative investors, including ourselves, we're looking for a 10% entry fee or less. Meaning if the house is worth 300K, we want to be all in at less than 30K. And a lot of this stuff, I know you guys have heard before, but for some of the newer people, I'm just going over it again. Meaning that 30K or that 10% entry or less, that would include cash to seller, agent commission, closing costs, potentially an assignment fee as well if we were going to assign to someone. So that's where we need to be on those. So say, for example, someone had, let's say there was a $500,000 home and that's what it was listed at, 500K. That's about what it was worth. And they had a loan balance of 400K. So there's a decent amount of equity in that deal, but that's not something where we're going to come out of pocket and offer them, you know, 70 to 100K cash down in their pocket at closing. That's not a deal. No one's going to buy that because that's a high entry fee. That's probably close to, you know, a 20% entry fee. So no one's going to buy that deal. Either us, we wouldn't buy it. And then I know us wholesaling it, we wouldn't be able to find a buyer for that. So what we do instead to try to keep that 10% entry fee or less is we're going to pitch something called the hybrid, where we're taking over the payment subject to, and then we're also doing a seller carry, aka seller finance portion on the remaining balance of that equity. So another thing we could pitch then for that $500,000 home, we could do 10K cash to the seller at closing, and then create a note of $80,000 or $90,000 with $100 monthly payments for, you know, 20 years, 15 years, whatever it may be, and then a balloon on the balance then. So basically what that hybrid or the seller carry portion of that structure does is it allows that seller to get all the equity out of their house that they wanted, but without us having to come up front and pay it all out in one lump sum at closing. And a lot of people, they find that appealing because of course the house is going to appreciate over time. It's going to gain equity. Rents are going to increase. So they would much rather pay off that 80, 90K in terms of the best like investment and cash on cash return. They'd rather pay that off over the course of 10 years rather than coming out of pocket instantly and putting up that money to get in the deal. So that's just kind of a brief touch on the hybrid. Was there anything you wanted to add on that, Alex? I'm not sure if I touched on the 10% thing that you mentioned.
So just real quick, I'll pull a list up. Ooh, wait, hold on. Let me not screen share this. Give me 1 sec. Let me just kind of explain with the list in front of me, just so everyone's on the same page. Okay. So just looking at this list real quick, we're able to see the estimated percent equity, right? So with this, just looking at this deal, this one has 15% equity. So knowing that, and we want to be 10% when acquiring these properties using creative finance, it would kill the deal to try to pay off all their equity up front. So in this case, we are also doing direct to agent. So you have to always factor in 3% for agent commission, 1% for closing costs. So that's 4% out of 10% that's already taken up. So max we're ever really able to offer is 6% of the purchase price to the seller at close of escrow. And I mean, it's going to range, and obviously in all of our deals, we want to be in as low as possible, right? Because it just increases the cash on cash return. And so just looking at this one, when you look over here, estimated money to seller, it's 8,000, but the estimated equity is 42,000. And the reason it's like that is because we can't give them the 42K. So we need to give them 8K plus 3% commission plus 1% closing costs would be an ideal number for us. But then I just want to clarify that these are just estimates and they're not 100% accurate. So it's really just to give you a ballpark and kind of guide you on how you want to handle the conversation. So like when I'm calling on this 15%, I already know in my head that when I call the agent, that I'm gonna have to pitch and figure out what the motivation is for the seller. Because if I know that this is their second home, they don't need all the equity up front, it's a perfect scenario. But if I know that they're moving and they might need the moving for moving costs or just to close on their next home, then I know it might be a little tougher of a scenario to make work because they were expecting to receive that 42K on a traditional sale. So getting 8K wouldn't really make much sense to them. But then you look down at ones like, let's just look at the second one, estimated equity 5%. So on a deal like that, we could definitely come a lot closer to just making this a subject to, because like I said, we could really do 6% of the purchase price to the seller. And it's not always going to be like that. It's just a rough estimate to kind of give you a better idea of how we come up with that 10% entry and what most of it consists of. And so with this one, we would most likely be able to give them all of their equity. So I know when I call this agent, it's going to be a subject to pitch. And then when I call this agent with the 15% equity, it's going to be a hybrid pitch. So just kind of knowing how to use the information will really help you. And like I said, I just want to make sure everyone knows this information is just rough estimates. They're not going to be accurate, but it'll be a rough ballpark for you to at least sound like you know what you're talking about when you're speaking with the agent.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too on that one, like that first one, Alex, where it's saying estimated equity, that number, that's the assumption between the estimated loan balance and what their asking price is. And I don't want to overcomplicate it, which is maybe what I'm doing here. But
no, you're not.
Basically, though, yeah, basically the asking price doesn't mean that's what the house is worth. Like there's some of these listings, like we have one right now where the asking price is more than what it's worth. I still think we're able to maybe move it though, but there's scenarios like that where the asking price is more than what the house is worth, and then it doesn't really make sense. But that's more of like of course you don't want to underwrite all these deals and look at comps and stuff before you call, but that's just one thing to consider. And then another thing to consider too is it says the estimated equity is 42,000 there. And that's the spread between the loan balance and the asking price. So the seller wouldn't actually net 42K on a traditional sale. They would probably net closer to 25K or something like that, just because if, we're coming in and we're paying closing costs and agent commissions, in a traditional sale, the seller's usually taking that on, or a decent percentage of it on. So that's another thing, that seller wouldn't actually net 42K in that scenario. That's just the estimated equity, which is the difference between what it's listed at, the ask price, and then that loan balance.
Right.
Yeah. Just wanted to mention that real quick.
Yeah.
Guys, what was the percentage you said to look for in terms of hybrid? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I would say if it says estimated to be over 10%, and like Jack said, yeah, I think that kind of answers your question. But for the most part, if you see it above 10%, you should already know before you go in the call that it's most likely going to be a hybrid deal. But like Jack said, it's a case by case scenario, and kind of allow us to do that underwriting and figure out what exactly the home is worth. It's a little too complicated for you to kind of figure out, and it'll also just take too much time to do every single call. So just use these numbers.
Hey guys, isn't the equity the what they purchased, what they bought the house for, to what the value is, like the market value, not necessarily what they're selling it for?
Yeah, so that's what it's showing though. Like on our data here, it's their asking price of what they're asking. So to find what it's actually worth, that would mean, okay, we need to underwrite this deal to see exactly what the equity is. And of course, if we're doing this at volume like we are, even not just for Alex and I's sake, but for you as well, you get a list and let's say there's 50 leads on there. You don't want to underwrite every single lead before you call on it because that's going to be a huge waste of time. So unfortunately, it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, we just have to, which actually I don't think it's really a hindrance at all or any sort of negative if you don't know the exact numbers before calling, because I wouldn't say, oh, this is a hybrid deal. So what I'm going to do here is we can take over the payments and then we can do a seller carry portion on the remaining equity. Like I would just still have the normal conversation of, hey, we can come in and we could take over those existing mortgage payments and I would just need these exact numbers. And then once we get those, then we can look at it more and see what kind of offer we need to be at. Or there's some scenarios too, if someone doesn't want to do a seller carry, then they might say, okay, can we have, because there's been instances before, Alex, where we'll offer the sub 2 with a little more cash to seller up front, and then we'll have the carry. And usually like the sub 2 with more cash up front is like our max allowable offer, where the seller carry portion is like, of course, less cash at closing the seller, but then they get more equity in the carry. So yeah, it's just going to be a case by case basis. And I don't think it should really change anyone's pitch at all. I think it's just good to know that going into it that, hey, this might be one of those scenarios where the seller is actually going to carry some equity and receive monthly payments on their equity. It's not something we're just paying them out lump sum for at close. Would you agree with that, Alex? I don't think we should really be changing anything of what we're
Don't
saying.
change your pitch. Just keep in mind if you see that there's more than 10% equity, it might not just be a subject to, even though it's supposed to be a low equity deal.
And then did that pretty much cover it for the hybrid stuff? I think that did. Or was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Touch on as far as hybrid deals.
Yeah.
Not really. One thing to keep in mind when we're coming up with a seller equity, the second note for the monthly payments, we obviously want to be as low as possible on that as well, but it needs to make sense in terms of underwriting and making sure it cash flows. Most of the deals we're looking at don't cash flow as a long-term rental, but it's important to kind of use that as a standard of how much we could really give them a month.
Yeah, and we try to keep it as low as possible for those monthly payments too, like never really over $200 a month. Unless there's a scenario where it cash flows a ton, but most of these deals, like Alex said, we're looking at aren't really cash flowing a lot. And a lot of these exits are either someone getting a long-term rental that breaks even, having to do some sort of midterm rental or pad split, or a wrap. But I would say most of the exits on a lot of these we're looking at are wraps. Because of course some HOA have restriction in terms of midterm rentals and short-term rentals and pad splits and things like that. Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers it for the hybrid stuff. And then for the seller finance stuff, should we hop to that now, Alex?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so like I was just saying maybe like 10 minutes ago or something, we are thinking about maybe trying to incorporate some more of this stuff. Essentially, like the seller finance is a portion of the hybrid, right? Because the hybrid's the sub 2 and then the seller finance kind of put together. But the seller finance is typically just going to be on that free and clear property that doesn't have any mortgage, meaning they either owned it for a long period of time, 30 plus years, and paid off the mortgage, or someone bought it on a cash sale and it's owned free and clear, whatever it may be. And then in terms of pitching this stuff, I don't know, because Alex, we're still thinking, we're not 100% sure if I think we'll implement something like this, but what did we really want to dive into in terms of the seller finance structure with the explanations of it? Because we already given an explanation of what it is. It's just, it could just be, I guess, pitching it and whatnot on the seller finance, but I don't know if we want to start teaching people how to pitch it if we haven't 100% pulled list or know if we're actually going to do that.
I think it's, who knows, they might not come across something on our specific list, but if they come across something that is passed from like a realtor, I think it's important for them to still know. So
true. Yeah, no, that's very true. So sort of like what I was saying, and then Alex, you could chime in after. In terms of pitching this stuff, a lot of it, or at least what I've done in the past when I've done seller finance deals, when I've wholesaled them, is typically if it's someone's personal home, their primary residence they live in, there's a smaller likelihood that they're going to sell their finance it to you. Not saying that won't happen, but there's a smaller likelihood if they're living in that house and they need to move for whatever reason it is. They still might, they still might be fine with 10 to 15% down in monthly payments. But I've noticed the higher probability is when someone has multiple houses in their rental properties and they're like a tired landlord situation where they're just fed up and annoyed with dealing with tenants, maintenance, repairs, things like that, where then it's kind of easier to speak with them, figure out their pain points, and then basically see how much they were making with that as a rental. So say if they were cash flowing like $1,000 a month and that really wouldn't work seller finance numbers wise, then that's an exception though. A lot of rentals won't be cash flowing that much, but if someone's only making 400, 500 bucks a month on a rental that's owned free and clear, then you can totally structure it, negotiate it in a way where, hey, I can pay you $500 a month for the next 30 years and give you some sort of down payment. I can put 10% down on this house. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And this is the whole pitch of, well, if you're open to terms, I can give you the price you want. There's a lot of different ways you can go at it, but that's just one of the key like middle points of it is kind of figuring out what those monthly payments need to look like. And the best way of figuring that out is seeing one, of course, their needs, and then two, also comparing it to how it was performing as a rental. And then there's a lot of different like levers you can pull with it as well too. Like for example, a common objection is, well, I'm 60 years old right now. I don't want to carry a note for 30 years. I'll be 90. Who knows if I'll be around till 90? Well, then the thing is that we can do is we can then kind of pivot into, well, hey, what if we offered you a balloon in 15 years and paid off that remaining balance in 15 years? Or say if someone wanted a higher purchase price, okay, well, if we give you the price you want, we're doing principal only payments and there's no interest. Or like there's a lot of levers you can pull with purchase price, interest rate, balloon. Those are kind of the three main ones. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, so I'll just give you all an example. Yesterday, I had a call direct to seller, and the lady was basically saying how if we were to purchase the home, she wants over appraisal. And so I was like, okay, well, how much would you want? She wouldn't give me her price. And then I just kept digging a little deeper. Eventually, she went to say how her last investment home, she had to pay a lot in capital gains taxes, which is another great reason to use seller finance. And so with that, although she might want over market, if we could come in and structure the deal where we're in it low, and she mentioned that it was a hybrid deal, so I guess it's not really a seller finance, but for the seller finance portion of it, that second note, if we could structure something to where she's making maybe interest on her money, but also paying less in capital gain taxes off the rip, it would definitely help her make more money over time. So as an investor, I think going forward, I personally wouldn't want to ever sell my homes with cash unless I needed the money or maybe if it was like a fix and flip. But with seller finance, you're able to really capture much more money than if you were to just sell traditionally.
Yeah, that's very true. Good point. I completely forgot to touch on that. And of course, we don't want to be bringing that up as investors in terms of like, hey, well, I could you can make some nice interest on our monthly payments because we don't want that. But a lot of people seller financing, they will think of that. And I've had deals I negotiated because I was doing a lot of the direct to seller stuff with like PPC leads before I started doing a lot of the direct to agent stuff. And there was a decent handful of scenarios where when we would be negotiating and talking these deals out, where basically someone would say, well, current interest rate is 7%. So I want at least 7% on what you would be paying me. And then I'm like, well, wait a second. I'm already giving you exactly what you want purchase price wise and this and this and that. So honestly, I was thinking no interest rate. I was at principal only payments, but I might be able to come up to 2% or 3% or something like that. When in reality, I know my max is 5% because we were going to wrap this deal. And then we ended up at 4% with the seller. And it was a lot of negotiations back and forth. But basically where I was at was, hey, interest rates, basically, I don't think they're going to keep rising forever. I think we're going to come back down in the next couple of years slightly. Who knows though? But I was leveraging that point of, well, hey, your cash is in the bank. If you're using like a cash savings account or a high yield account, you're maybe getting 4% interest. Now I think it's closer to 5. But I was basically telling the seller like, hey, that isn't 100% guaranteed and locked in. This is, you're getting guaranteed locked in 4% interest with us over the next 30 years. And you are at least backed behind an asset. So if we failed to make a payment or something happened or whatever, and they had to foreclose on us, then they get their house back. They keep the $40,000 down payment we made to them and all the monthly payments we made before. So after I explained that and the benefits, she saw more value in what I had offered than her just saying, I want to keep my whatever, sell this cash or on market or whatever it may be, and just keep my money in the bank and collect interest on that. So that's a good point to mention as well as the capital gains on that too. That's a big one with seller finance.
Did anyone have any questions in regards to either a hybrid deal structure or a seller finance deal structure?
I will say one thing too to mention. A lot of people will pay. So for the subject to deals, a lot of people will pay 10% entry fees or less. Some people go a little higher. It's really just case by case basis, but you really never see someone do like a 20% entry on a sub 2 unless that thing's cash flowing like thousands of dollars a month and it looks insane, which I almost never see those. But for a seller finance deal, you have a lot more people that are willing to do a closer to 20% entry, 15 to 20% entry fee than you would with the subject to. So that's one thing that's appealing with the seller finance too, is we don't have to be in quite as low as a sub 2. But if we have a scenario present itself, we should still be treating it like a sub 2 in terms of our entry, because we don't want to tell them, oh, I can give you 10%, 15% down instantly. And then basically you never want to be anchoring someone at your max allowable offer. So like, that's another thing too. Like Alex and I, we try to find that balance where our offer isn't going to offend the seller or agent and make them not want to work with us. But at the same time, our first offer or LOI we send out, we don't want to be giving them our max allowable offer, because you're basically just digging yourself in a ditch if you do that. Because it's very rare when you put out an offer, someone goes, yeah, I'll take it. That sounds great. Usually there's negotiation there. So it's finding that point of like, okay, I'm going to set an anchor here and I know the highest I can be is up here. And if my anchor is here, maybe I'll end up somewhere here and then I still have a spread to wholesale my deal. So that's just one thing to keep in mind too, not only with creative finance, but cash deals, all that stuff. You never want to be pitching or starting off with your max allowable offer. And you also don't want to be, and some people will say it differently and they're making tons of money, so they can tell me I'm wrong. But like the cash wholesale deals, there's some people I know that make just insanely offensive lowball offers, which you can totally do. But through a lot of the sales training stuff I've done and people I've worked with that do extremely well, like one thing we do is more so of like setting the anchor and picking up that anchor instantly. Because if you're telling someone their house is listed at 400K or it's worth 400K and they know that, and you're coming in and offering $200,000 cash, that could be a great anchor point. But at the same time, there's probably a high probability you're going to piss that person off a lot and they won't take you seriously. And they'll think, hey, Jack is a waste of time. Alex is a waste of time. I don't want to talk to them for even saying my house is worth 200K. So it's kind of finding that balance point of like having the offer be offensively low, but not so offensively low where they don't even take you serious. And then also one thing that I've done too is like setting the anchor and then picking up the anchor instantly. So honestly, a lot of investors in this area, of course, me being an investor coming in and buying these houses all cash, we're not paying market value. Some of my partners and other investors I know in the area, they would pay about $200,000 for a house like this, and then kind of pause and then hear their reaction and then instantly pick up the anchor. I don't even want to offend you with a price like that. I could give you the price you want if you're open to terms. And that's how I've locked up some seller finance deals, like direct to seller previously. But yeah, that was kind of just a random side off tangent. Was there anything?
And one more thing to add.
Yeah.
One more thing is with seller finance deals, they're a lot more safer to the end buyer, because there is no due on sale clause. Since there is no existing mortgage, you're basically creating another mortgage.
Yeah, totally. And that's what's appealing to people and why they're willing to pay more of an entry. Not like subject to is super risky or anything like that, but some people just are more appealed for sure by the seller finance stuff. Anyone have any questions or things they wanted to add in terms of whether it was the hybrid, the seller finance stuff, or that last kind of portion in terms of the sales process and actually where you're pitching and anchoring and things like that? Or
Hey, I had a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So, that comment that you said, I don't even want to offend you. Could you repeat that? Because I know Pace uses that, I'm pretty sure. So I just want to like kind of memorize something like that because I'm trying to get the terminology down,
Gotcha.
like of how.
Yeah, and this is actually totally something that we could incorporate too. I mean, I'm just trying to think here. Because basically, like with the subject to deals, if someone's like, oh, they really want cash, like they're not really open to creative, they want cash deal. Well, I don't even want to
Yeah.
offend you, but I know investors in this area and people I work with, they're paying for a property like this $150 a square foot, which would be about 200,000. I don't even want to
Yeah.
offend you with an offer like that, but and then you would pivot into wherever you would be, which usually it's pivoting into a seller finance or sub two or some sort of creative scenario, because you're going to use that low ball anchor for cash to be your anchor, where you then pivot into one of the other creative finance. So like when I was doing the direct to seller stuff, this wasn't on market. So of course I can pivot into these other options where I would present that like anchor, and then I would pivot into, I'm trying to remember, I think it was seller finance. It was seller finance, which would then be potentially we keep it as a rental or a wrap, depending on the terms. And then if they're not open to seller finance, then it's novation. So it would be low ball cash anchor, picking up the anchor instantly, pivoting into seller finance. And then if they don't do that, then it's a pivot into novation.
And for novation, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say the novation stuff though, that's only direct to seller, because novation, you're listing something on the MLS. Yeah.
And you're making the profit between how much you help them rehab it and then their price versus the ARV of your rehab that has increased value, right?
You're not necessarily doing I mean, a lot of people who do novations, they do rehabs, but a lot of them are I've only done one novation. And I guess I've worked on a couple others, but with the novations, a lot of them, you're not actually doing rehab. You're just getting the house. It's almost like a net listing. So you agree upon that price with the seller, and then you get the legal right to market that property on the MLS. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're having to do a bunch of repairs to do a novation. A lot of them do involve repairs and whatnot, but a lot of times people are just doing as is listings.
Because I see the potential for, especially like I'm here in Michigan, I see a lot of these homes that are like older people that, they don't really get good agents to take pictures. They have like blurry pictures, and then their like floors are kind of outdated. They just need some, painting done and some kitchen cabinet like painting even, or resurfacing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
To me, that's a great innovation where I don't have to get into an entry where I have to buy your whole house. I can just get into an agreement with you. Give me 6 months maximum, right? 6 to 12 months maximum. Not even that. I'll get this work done, and then I'll sell it. When we sell it, you make your portion and then I make my portion, right? Is that correct, or is that similar to what?
Yeah. And some of the novation, and I didn't do really many novations at all, but I did a decent amount of sales training for it. And basically, like the novation, one guy I learned from, he called it the concierge service, where it's a hands-off service for that seller, meaning, hey, I'll handle the negotiations with agents, buyers, and things like that. I have a large network myself with a lot of agents I work with in that area. And what we do, we also offer renovations. So when we list your property, 99% of the time, since this is older and needs some work, an FHA loan won't approve this, a VA loan won't approve this. People will want upgrades and things like that. So we actually offer upgrades. And then in the listing, you ask about renovations. And then essentially what you do then is it's basically just more of a point to getting the seller to be willing to do this and being open to it. But basically, then you get that legal right to list it on the MLS from the seller. You agree to their net price, and then you offer renovations for that end buyer if they request them. And then once they request them and they're pretty much locked in, then you can do some minor things they request if needed, or you just subtract it from the purchase price you listed it at if you don't want to deal with it.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions or anything else from anyone? Anything you want to touch on, Alex? Sorry, the Novation stuff was kind of random. I just threw that in there because that's like was part of the direct to seller sales process we did. Awesome, Rich. You have a good weekend, man.
I think I kind of touched on everything I wanted to touch on. I mean, if there isn't any more questions, I think we could end it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm wondering, should we jump in? Or I know you're away, Alex, so I can totally do it. I don't care. But I'll jump in the general voice channel, and for a couple of the newer people, if they need specific help or questions with things in terms of getting started, I'm happy to help with that.
Cool.
I'll just chill out there
Hey,
for like
guys.
2 minutes. Hey.
Hi, it's Milani. Just wanted to ask you, just with regards to like when this is probably not related to the call as much, but I just wanted to ask like when you actually started, like from the very first time you did your first deal, what would you say was required at the time, like financially, like what you needed personally to be able to actually start a process? Because like what is needed when someone actually wants to make their first deal? At what point do you say, yeah, I'm ready, I'm ready to make my first deal, like financially and all that stuff?
When you say that, are you talking about buying your own property or what do you mean by that? Sorry.
Yeah, like even with regards to like, even if you're doing like a sub 2, even if you're doing like, like sub 2 or, that kind of deal, what would you say, like, because I know we're not using our own finances, but like, is there ever a time when you say you're still not ready because you just need some sort of backup plan? For example, if you did, like, let's just say you did do a deal with sub 2 and you don't have any of your finances, or you don't obviously use your own finances, but when you're actually making that, let's just say you're the person who's renting, like you do a long-term rental, like a buy and hold, you do a long-term rental, and then someone doesn't make payments, for example. Obviously, there might be some level of responsibility on your part to ensure that there's no gap or no missed payments and stuff. So what would you say would be at least a basis for you before you start a deal?
Yeah, that's a great question. So honestly, it really depends too, because some of these deals we are having to use our own money. Some of them we're not. So basically one thing is too, it's like if it's a deal where you're not using any of your own money and you found a very solid funding partner to come in and fund the whole deal for you, then that's one thing you could have in the agreement, JV agreement, whatever it may be with that partner, basically stating that, okay, they're taking on all risk and liability. Of course, if that's the case, you're probably going to get, it wouldn't probably be a 50-50 equity split. It's really going to vary, especially if it's a rental. That's probably something where you're getting a very small amount of equity. It's a lot harder to find funding partners on rentals than it is for like wraps, because usually wraps, the cash is in and then the cash is out within like 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
But on a rental, let's say like there's some guy I was negotiating with previously where he was like, okay, well, we can do a 50-50 split on cash flow, except I'll get 100% of the depreciation right off. You won't get any of that. And then I'll get 75% of the appreciation. You'll get 25.
Okay.
And then he was going to cover all expenses and things like that. But then say if you didn't want to use a funding partner and you wanted to take it down on your own, then it's like, okay, well, my entry here on this sub 2 is 15K. There might be 3 months of holding costs until I start making money on this, depending the exit. So I'll need an extra 8K. If something happens and a tenant doesn't pay or this happens, okay, I should have another 10K cash reserves for this. I mean, it's really just going to be a case by case basis. And then there is, like I was saying with that first scenario, if you have a funding partner who comes in, funds the whole thing and takes on all risk and liability, you can be no money out of pocket other than just your sweat equity and time. But how are you going to find that funding partner, build a relationship, build the credibility to get them to do a deal like that where they're taking on all risk and still giving you a reasonable portion of equity in that deal?
Of equity. Okay. So from your third example, it's almost like you're saying at least have something like 25 grand.
Probably. I would say
the number kind of varies, right? Because there's some homes that only cost 150K. So I think it just kind of varies. I would say it's always a good idea to maybe keep 10K in reserves for if something goes wrong. I don't think that'll ever hurt you. So
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. No
Yeah.
worries.
And of course, too, like if you're really over leveraging and just jumping in and have a ton of properties, then you don't have a lot of capital.
Mhm.
Because it's like, okay, let's say I had a little bit of capital and everything went into properties. It's great. I have these properties now, but then if I'm responsible for holding costs, liabilities, and issues with those properties, then all of a sudden me thinking I'm in a great spot with 5 properties could turn into a mess where now I'm like 30K in the hole and need to figure out how I'm going
Yeah.
to get 30K.
Yeah.
Yeah.